This technically happened last night, but I was just starting a graveyard shift, and I'm only now getting it all down. I work at a gas station. We're just outside a large chunk of suburbs. None of that middle of nowhere. Like, we aren't exactly near any other businesses, but we are rarely completely dead for hours at a time. It was just past midnight, and with everything going on in the US right now, not a lot of things other than gas stations and bars are open at night anymore, so it was a slower evening. I was the only one in the store, and a car pulled up to one of the two double-sided pumps out front. Pretty standard white sedan. I'm not great with car brands, but it was a little nicer, like upper middle class and probably only a few years old. A woman gets out and starts walking towards our door, like she's in a daze. Legitimately, this woman looked like she saw a ghost. She wanders up, sort of freezes at the door for a second, with a 1,000-yard stare, before opening it and coming in. She didn't go looking for anything, didn't start shopping, just sort of stood inside for what felt like ages. Again, bars are still open, so I think maybe she's a little drunk or had a rough night or something. So I give the usual, welcome to gas station. Let me know if you need any help finding anything. And she finally notices me and immediately asks the weirdest damn question I have ever been asked on the job. You can see me, right? Yeah, like what else do you say? She breaks down crying in the middle of my store, so I'm already headed around the corner to see what's up. I have my cell phone out in case I need to call the cops or something for her. I get her to sit down on a nearby pallet of soda, and I'm grabbing her a bottle of water. And after she catches her breath a little, she tells me, I thought I had died. Again, I'm thinking maybe she is on something, but she's a middle-aged woman who looks like a standard local suburban housewife. We're a pretty boring township without your average junkies like you'd find closer to the cities. So she asks if she can call her husband to pick her up and wait with me. She has her own phone and does so. Not really telling him anything either, just where she is at and if he can come to get her. He says he'll call an Uber and be there as soon as possible. We're waiting. So far nobody else has showed up, so I'm keeping most of my attention on her. And eventually she starts to explain to me. I was driving home from dinner with my coworkers, and as I'm driving through an intersection, a truck ran a red light and hit me. Now, her car is still at the pump without a scratch on it. She goes on to say she remembers her car being pushed into a pole, going airborne, and then nothing. I tried to calm her down, letting her know that her car is out front and it looks fine, but she insisted that she completely blacked out, woke up in an ambulance for a split second, passed out again, and then woke up again in the driver's seat of her car at the same intersection, waiting for the light to change. Perfectly fine. This whole thing freaked her out so badly that she drove to the nearest place, us, just so she could get out of her car. Husband eventually showed up to get her. He asked if I had any idea what happened, and even though she sort of explained it to me, I just shrugged because, no, I had no idea what was happening anymore. She reluctantly got into the passenger seat of the car, and he drove them back home. That was hours ago. After which, I worked an entire shift at the station, trying to wrap my head around what the absolute hell I had just witnessed. Do you know the whole theory about how when people die in one timeline, they shift into another? I think that might have happened to me. Back in early July of this year, my family, mother, father, me, brother, and sister, we're all going on a road trip to Montana to visit our grandparents. Prior to the trip, I had a horrible feeling about going. I kept having flashes of car accidents in my head, and I was sure that we were going to get in one if we left. It was so strange because I have pretty severe anxiety disorder, but this didn't feel like my anxiety at all, and I have never had anxiety about road trips. I love them. So we left Saturday of that week. I had told my parents I had a bad feeling about driving up there, but they dismissed me as being anxious. But I had never felt so certain about something in my life. Getting into that car felt like signing my death sentence. So we get about 6 hours in, and at this point, I started to think I was being ridiculous, and a wave of calmness just washes over me. This is where shit gets strange. My dad passes an underpass, and everything just shifts. I feel like I saw everything in slow motion for a whole 4 or so minutes. My parents were joking beforehand, but their faces moved so slowly. And then the light in the car started to shift. This was the scary part, because I thought I must have been going insane. For a few seconds, there was a huge illumination of light into our car, and I looked at my family. I could not tell who they were or what they meant to me. And that's when everything just came back. The lights shifted back, and I knew who everyone was, but it felt like something imperceptible had changed. I closed my eyes and tried to make sense of the past few minutes, and when I reached back to remember, I saw blood. Our car and another minivan in shambles on the side of the highway, right beyond the underpass, and mangled bodies. I remembered sensations I should not have known. What splattered brain matter looks like, the smell of something burning, the way I couldn't breathe, but this never happened. Yet I remember that the car in front of us had switched lanes, even though there was a truck in front of us. Realized it at the last second and hit us with a literal impact. I have no history of psychosis, and I have never been in any sort of car accident. This wasn't PTSD, and I have never had anxiety over being in the car in any sort of way prior to this. And maybe I could have just brushed it off, but I still think about it when I'm driving my own car, and it made me a more cautious driver. I don't know what happened. It was just a weird situation, and I remember having this distinct feeling in the moment that I had died in some sense. I'm not a spiritually sensitive person by any means. I am a scientist at heart, but this truly was something I cannot explain, and I fully accept that I might be reading too much into this, and for some reason, I imagined an event that never happened, but I thought I would share anyway. So this event happened on October 7th, 2019 at 5:46 p.m. and I'll briefly try to describe it. I was on my way to running some errands, riding in my car while on the phone with this friend. I remember the weather being super weird, cloudy but hot. I don't really know how to describe it, but it felt like the air had some kind of heaviness to it. While I was talking to her, she said a few sentences to which I replied in agreement. Suddenly, she starts saying the exact same sentences she just said 30 seconds earlier, only in a different tone and pace. It really sounded like she was repeating herself, and not like the actual voice glitched and repeated, which is what made it even creepier. So at this point, everything became fuzzy and weird, almost as if I lost sense of time. In the meantime, I heard my messages ringtone going off a few times through the earpiece, but I decided to check them out later on. So I go on and tell her I'm pretty sure she already said to me all of those things, and the most unsettling thing is that her voice would stop whenever I tried telling her, as if she was actually listening, but would continue on as soon as I'd go silent without saying anything regarding the fact that she was repeating herself over and over. It was like talking to someone who was purposely trying not to answer. It felt incredibly odd, especially considering each sentence was slightly different than the previous one, but the meaning kept on being the same. That's when I lost her completely. The line got cut off, and I went to check the messages I received earlier. Turns out they were actually from her. 2 of them were missed calls, and the last one said I should call her back as soon as I could. I was still actively talking to her, while at the same time she was asking me to call her back. Definitely one of the most bizarre things that's ever happened to me. I went to a laundromat at around 2 a.m. with my oldest son. After we put the laundry in, we went to a McDonald's drive-thru to get something to drink. The drive-thru was packed with about 5 or 6 cars ahead of us. which is not super uncommon. McDonald's drive-thrus are notoriously slow this late at night. After about 5 minutes of waiting, I noticed none of the cars were moving forward, so I decided to go around the car in front of me to the next drive-thru lane. This location has 2 lanes. As I'm pulling around the people in front of us, I look into the car to see why they are not moving, and both people, driver and passenger, looked dead. Heads tilted all the way back, eyes shut, not moving. I freaked out and tried to pull out of the drive-thru entirely, going around the other cars just to get out of there. And I kid you not, the next car I passed, all the passengers also looked dead. Heads tilted back, eyes shut. I panicked, thinking maybe they were all shot or someone killed them all. So I hit the gas and got the fuck out of there. I couldn't fathom what happened and could barely speak. I was hyperventilating. So my son called 911 to report what had happened, and they sent an officer to check. A few minutes later, the cop called us back and said everything was fine at McDonald's. No dead patrons, business as usual. Mind you, my son saw it too. We both saw the car in front of us, and the people looked dead. That shit was terrifying. It literally looked like one of those Rapture movies or end of the world type of shit. Needless to say, I can't wrap my head around what we saw or why. I'm still scared over it. I know I'm not crazy because my son saw it too, but it feels crazy to even say it. My friend messaged me and said she thinks we are experiencing a glitch. This is also new to me. I had never heard of glitches even being a thing, but I am super freaked out and would love your thoughts because I have severe anxiety and feel so crazy now.